In this video, we're going to be taking a look at converting some vector artwork that we created into an embroidery file that we can stitch out on our embroidery machine using the InkStitch extension for InkScape. Now, in the listing description below, we have a link to the video that we made on creating this artwork. And then also we have our email address that if you want the original source file that we're going to be using in this video, along with the finished embroidery files for your embroidery machine, just send us an email asking us to send you the Swoosh Kitty files, and we're happy to send those out to you at no charge. Additionally, I would like to encourage you to share in the comments if you have videos that you've seen that cover logo design in InkStitch. What's interesting to me is InkStitch has been out for years, and there are a lot of InkStitch videos on YouTube, but when it comes to creating actual logos start to finish, I have not found very many videos out there, and the ones that are out there are for really old versions of InkStitch, and InkStitch is vastly improved over the years. So in this video, we're using the very latest version, 2025 version of InkStitch. And so with that said, we'll go ahead and get started here. Now, when we created the artwork, one of the things that we took the extra time to do was really, you can see here in our layers palette, everything is specified very specifically and in a certain order on various layers. And this is really going to help us when we go to convert these objects to embroidery. So let's go ahead and get started. One thing to know about InkStitch is the stitch order. The way InkStitch works is it starts from the bottommost layer, the bottommost object, and will work its way towards the top. Okay, so obviously that's important if we want satin stitches on top of the fill stitches here on our kitty. Our satin border is at the top, and then our kitty pieces will stitch out first. And you can see I put those on a separate layer. So first things first, we'll click on this first icon here, and that is your layers and objects palette. And let's come down to the kitty layer and turn off that layer. So we'll just get rid of that. We'll go ahead and get rid of all of their satin border objects, turn that layer off. And that leaves us just this swoosh and our Nike text. Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and select our Nike text. And we're going to go ahead and convert this into embroidery stitches. So we go to extensions, we can choose InkStitch, and we could choose params. And this window that we're looking at here is the new param window. So if your params does not look like this, then you do not have the latest version of InkStitch. And I would definitely encourage you to upgrade because this is vastly improved. Now, one thing I will also point out, in the listing description below, I will link to a video that I saw recently by Project Anonymous. They have a lot of InkStitch videos available, but one video they did fairly recently is they go through and discuss what all these various options are in params. Now, these options are fill stitch options, but when we look at satin stitch options, we have a whole nother set of params. So it's quite lengthy. I did not watch the entire thing, but what I did watch of it was pretty interesting and informative. Now, one thing that we'll know right off the bat here is you can see the fill stitches are perfectly horizontal. And most generally, you never want your fill stitches to be exactly horizontal. So I'm going to change my angle to 20 degrees. Okay, and then it will update my preview here, and you can see that now my stitches are at 20 degrees. Okay, now we're not going to really get into modifying our underlay options or any other options here. We're just going to kind of stick with the default for simplicity. Now, the other thing that we can't see by default is if we click here, over here on the right-hand side, there's a little icon that says Info. Let's click on that. That will tell us some information about this design that is important. And you'll see right here that we have 4 jump stitches. Now we can't see the jump stitches because we have them turned off by default, but if we click on our little frog, now you can see our jump stitches. So let's back this up and take a look at this. So here our N is completing, and then we got this big jump stitch from here all the way to the next section. And we'll just fast forward a little bit, and you can see it finishes right here, and then it jumps over to this next piece, and so on and so forth. Now, in practicality, we would not want these big jump stitches like this, okay? So we need to address that issue. Now, we can't do that in params, but we do need to adjust that jump stitch issue. So everything else is fine, so we're just going to choose Apply and Quit. Now, typically, I would wait to the end of designing to go in and do thread trims, but thread jumps. But we'll go ahead and do it here. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these pieces and come up here to Extensions, InkStitch, and we can add commands. So when we choose commands, you can see here we want to attach commands to these selected objects. Well, what kind of commands do we want to attach? Well, we want to attach the start and end position. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. And then we'll get a bunch of icons. Now this is where your document can get a little messy because we have all these little icons going every which direction. So that's why it's helpful for us. You see here we have a defined letter N. That's the piece that we want to modify. And then we can click on, you see where it says ending position and starting position. So you'll probably, rather than try and click on these icons in the document space, it might be easier to grab the piece that you want to work with here in your layers palette. It's really up to you. But you can see here we have our starting position. And I'm just going to move this. This is not really that important for our first piece where it actually starts, but I'm just going to start it right down here at this corner, okay? And then our end position, now that is important. So we're going to move it right over here, and it can be a little tricky. I am going to turn off snapping. I noticed I had snapping turned on. And this is why it's tricky, because see, now that icon is hidden behind some other objects, but we can select it pretty easily here in the layers palette. So just kind of keep that in mind. So right there, let's zoom in a little bit here. Right there is where it's going to end, and then it's going to jump right to here. See that little tiny jump? So now we need to go to the next object, which is the letter N2. And again, we'll click on the starting position icon, and we're going to move it down. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit here, and we'll move it down. And so now that thread jump is going to go boom, boom, just like that. And then we kind of just continue the process. So we're going to move this one down here, right to that corner, and then this one here, we'll pull it down right to that corner. This is the stop for this piece, and we're going to bring it over here. And then this is the start of our K, right to that corner there. And then the end position of our K is this icon, and it's going to come down to here, like so. And then the start position of our E, like so. And then our end position of our E is going to be right over here by our swoosh. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I'm not aware of any other way to handle our jump stitches. So it is, you know, a little bit labor intensive, but, you know, obviously only a few seconds. It wasn't that big a deal. But anyhow, let's move on. So we're going to select all of our elements, and let's take a look at extensions, InkStitch, and come down to visualize and export and click on simulator. But before we do that, let's talk about something that you may want to do. You could check the YouTube channel. We have a video on setting keyboard shortcuts to access Simulator and other functions within InkStitch with simply a keyboard shortcut. And so you may want to do that rather than having to go to extensions, InkStitch, Simulator, extensions, InkStitch, params. So all these things that we do all the time, you can set a keyboard shortcut and then you don't have to go through the menu every time, and that will be a big time saver as well. But let's go ahead and click on Simulator. Sometimes it takes a few seconds to bring up the simulator. It's got to think about everything that we've got going on here. So if it seems to stall, just give it a few seconds and it'll come to life. But now you can see that our thread jumps are just those tiny little jumps right there. This one you can't even see it because it's too tiny. Okay, so we definitely did take control of those thread jumps, and when we do our satin border around our little kitty head, those thread jumps won't even be seen in the final file. So you can see here, if we click on info, you can see jumps, we only have one. And the reason it's only showing that one is because those pieces are probably so close, like that's probably too close to even be considered a quote-unquote jump. Okay, so anyhow, that's why it's only showing one thread jump when it really appears that we have three. Okay, so now that we have all of that done, in fact, I bet let's take a look at our frog here, because that's what it's showing as the jump. Those are so close that those don't register as a thread jump, but this does. So you see how the Nike here is jumping to this one. And obviously we don't want that to happen, so that's another thing that we have to control. So I'll show you how we're going to do that here. So let's close that out. All right, so moving along, now what we have to do is we have to take a look at what we're going to do with our swoosh. Now, what I would like to do with the swoosh is I would like that to be stitched in a satin stitch. I want to try that anyhow, and I would prefer that to be satin instead of a fill. And I think it'll just stand out a little bit more. But there's some issues that are going to prohibit us from doing that, and let's take a look at them. So if I grab my measure tool here in InkStitch, M for measure, and I'm just going to measure from here to here, okay, that's 24 millimeters. And when we're doing our satin stitch, that is too long to have as a satin stitch. So that's not going to work for us. So we're going to come in here and make it a satin stitch, but we do have to address that issue. So first things first, we have to modify our swoosh. We have a closed shape. When you create a closed shape in InkScape, InkStitch interprets that as a fill object. So we need to tell InkStitch that no, this is no longer a closed shape. So we need to create something called rails. InkStitch is looking for rails. It's looking for two pieces. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to simply go to our node tool, and we're going to click on this node up here and hold our shift key down and click on this one, and we're going to choose this little icon right here, and you can see it says break path at selected nodes. Okay, so we've broken the path, but that's the only two places we broke it. So the way InkStitch sees this, it sees this piece as one continuous rail, and then it shows this piece as one continuous rail. Now, we're going to take this a step further just to illustrate the point a little bit more clearly. If we go to path and choose break apart, we're not going to have any fill, but we are going to shift click to have a stroke. And what you're going to see here when I pull this apart, you're going to see what I just talked about. So you see how InkScape now has that as one continuous piece, even though we have all these extra nodes, but we only broke it at those 2 points. So we have two rails. Now InkStitch requires the two rails it requires them to be combined. So that's why we wouldn't typically break it apart. When we broke apart the nodes, the two pieces were still combined. So we'll go back up to path and we'll choose combine, and now we're back to where we were after we broke those nodes. Okay, so now we can come up to extensions in InkStitch and params, and we can tell InkStitch that we want this to be satin. Okay, so first things first, we're not going to have it as a running stitch, so you'll see it will automatically convert it to satin. Okay, now obviously this does not look very good, right? So what we have to do is we have to give InkStitch just a little bit more information so it can render the satin stitch the way we really want it. So let's go ahead and close that out. Now this is not a complex shape per se, but it's also not just a circle or a rectangle. It does have some various thicknesses. We have this little cutout at the paw. So it's got, quote unquote, some complexity to it. So we need to give InkStitch just a little bit more information of exactly how we want to render that satin stitch. And the way we do that is come over here to our pen tool, which, by the way, the keyboard shortcut there is B. So I would typically use my keyboard shortcut. And what we have to do is we just have to add some stitch angles. So we're going to click, and then right click, and then click, and then right click right here at the paw, and click, and click, and click, and click, and click, and click, and click. Okay, so these are what we call rungs, and the rungs will define how those stitch angles should appear in the finished embroidery file. So one thing that we want to do, let's look at this a little bit more closely. You'll notice that these rungs are dashed lines. Well, they cannot be dashed lines, and the reason that they're dashed lines is because that's just so happens to be the last property we used. So we're going to take all of those that we just created, okay, and we're going to make sure that they do not have dashed lines. So we'll come to stroke style and we'll just give them a standard line. Looks like we missed one here. So there you go. Okay, so now our rungs are all solid lines. So now we can take all these pieces on our swoosh layer and we have to combine them. Okay, so now when we go into params, InkStitch is going to see our two paths. It's going to see all of our rungs, everything's been combined. So now it knows that, okay, all of this stuff is relating to this selected object, and it's going to render our satin stitches accordingly. So let's go to Extensions, InkStitch, Params. Now by default, it's going to think we want all these elements to be running stitches. So you can see here, what it's doing is making all those running stitches, but no, we don't want those to be running stitches. So again, it converted all of that to satin stitches, and now you can see that looks a lot more clear, right? So that's a good thing. So we'll go to satin column here. So far so good. Now if we wanted to adjust this a little bit more, we probably could, so that this was a little bit more straight. Let's just try that real quick. So you see how this is kind of going at an angle here, and then this one's kind of going at an angle. Let's see if we could control that a little bit more. So you can see here, this stitch angle, we'll select that. And what if we come down here and did something like that? And then this stitch angle will come down here and do something like that. And just see if just doing that will help define that around the paw a little bit better. I don't know if we can, but let's try that. Again, we're not going to do running stitches. Well, let's see what kind of result we get this time. All right, so you can see that we more or less got the same result as previously. So what that tells me is even though we did adjust those rungs a little bit, it gave us the same result, which is going to be fine. It's going to look good. I'm not that concerned about it. But at any rate, that's how we can control the angle of the stitches here. So our next thing that we need to do is we know that this stitch right here is way over what it should be. So I'm not going to go through all these crazy options with you, but we're just going to come down here and we are going to choose the maximum. This window is a little bit new to me, plus I don't have my glasses on. So let me turn that on. So there we go. So right here, it says maximum stitch length. We're going to set that at 5 millimeters. And then we're going to choose this option down here, random jitter. But before we do that, I just want to render this out so you can see. Now this icon over here is very helpful sometimes when we're trying to visualize a design. We click on that, and that will show us all of our needle points. So if we turn off, let's go back and let's just get rid of the maximum stitch angle or stitch length, and now you can see all of our needle points. All of our needle points are here, but then this, you see these needle points? This is because of the short stitches. And the reason that that exists is because if we had all of those threads out here, it would be extremely dense in needle. So what it does is it backs that off for us so that we don't have all of our needle points up here. And there's various params that we can use to adjust where those actually happen also. So that could be useful too. Okay, but for right now, we're trying to stick with just the most basic settings as much as possible. So the maximum stitch length, we are going to put that back to 5 millimeters. Now when we do that, so we're going to put that back to 5 millimeters, but when we do that, you could see that all of our needle penetrations are kind of like in a row. Okay, so you see how they're kind of in a row, and it might you might go ahead and stitch it out that way and see how you like it, but I'm going to choose this option down here, which is the random jitter. And so we are splitting the stitches. We are splitting the satin stitch here. So we're going to do 50%. And you'll watch how this will differ. And now you can see that we don't have any uniformity except for our short stitches. We still have those all in one line. But everything else got all spread all over the place. Okay? And again, this is something you're going to have to stitch out, and you're going to have to determine, hey, do I like this? Do I not like this? I'm going to go ahead and run with it and see what it looks like. So we'll go ahead and choose apply and quit. Okay, so that has now been defined as a proper satin. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select everything, and we're going to take a look at extensions, InkStitch, visualize, simulator. And I will just tell you this, if you're brand new to InkStitch, all this stuff is going to be like, oh, what in the world is he showing me? This looks way complicated. But I just promise you this, if you get in there and once you've done 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 logos, the things that I'm showing you kind of become second nature. And I promise you it will go a lot easier and smoother for you. So what we're concerned about is our thread jumps. So let's look. Let's turn on our little frog here. And you can see that this is our thread jump from here to here. Okay. And really, that particular thread jump technically would be okay because that'd be easy enough to trim away at the end. And we don't have any other embroidery in this area that would stitch on top of that thread jump. So technically speaking, that's okay. That's not that big a deal. But let's go ahead and close this out because we can avoid that. So we don't have to have that there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to just make a small change. So this is something that this part will just take practice and knowledge, because what we're going to do is we're going to change things up. We're going to move our swoosh above our Nike text. And remember, this was the last element that was stitched. And so now we're going to stitch Nike first and then the swoosh. So let's see what we got going on. So InkStitch, Visualize, Simulator. So now our Nike text stitches and then our swoosh stitches. We need to take a look at our jump, and you can see if I turn that on and off where that jump is happening. So that jump is happening from the corner of our E where we placed it, and then it's jumping all the way up here to this piece. Okay, so again, if we click on that, you'll see that we have that one thread jump, which is this right here. Now, we try to avoid thread jumps at all possible, and thread trims at all possibilities. So let's just take control of this a little bit better. So to deal with this, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our pen tool and we're going to start right here at the corner of our E and just click a little manual running stitch up to this top point here. So we've created that. Now we're going to have to go to strokes and turn that into a dashed line. And what that signifies to InkStitch is that that is a manual running stitch. Okay, so now we could see that this object is created right here. And yes, so we need to stitch E, stitch that object, and then finally stitch our swoosh. So now we'll go ahead and do this again. So extensions, InkStitch, Visualize Simulator. And now when we click our info, now you can see we have 0 thread jumps. And that ultimately is what we want. Okay, so we're good to go there. I do want to just show you one other thing as a possible that you could run into. So we're going to go to InkStitch params, and what if, and we're going to see this later on in this design, but notice that the stitch of our swoosh starts here at the top and comes down and finishes over here. Well, what if, so let's just go ahead and do this real quick. We're going to choose reverse rails, and we're going to review reverse both rails. And now what you're going to see is you're going to stitch, not sure why it gave us that. So we could change from it stitching basically from right to left and then go from left to right. Let's choose another option here. Let's, what if we reverse the first rail? It should give us a weird, no, it didn't. Okay, that surprises me that it didn't give us a weird result. So basically we didn't need to reverse both rails, we just reversed the one. But now you could see that it stitches from right to left, okay? So if you run into a situation, now if we look at our thread jumps, we don't see any because we don't have our Nike text selected. So let's do that real quick. I just want to illustrate this point for you. So we'll go back to extensions, InkStitch, Visualize, Simulator. Look at our thread jumps here. Okay. Now, if we back up, you can see that this object is still stitching from left to right, even though I thought we had just changed that. But at any rate, you saw how we can reverse it to control our thread jumps a little bit more clearly. When we get to the satin stitch area of the kitty, we're going to delve into that a little bit more. Okay, so those two elements now are completely converted into embroidery the way we want. So let's go ahead and turn off our Nike layer, and let's turn off our swoosh layer, and let's take a look at our kitty layer. Now this layer here is pretty straightforward. So you can see that this is comprised of two parts. Okay, so we may want to just go ahead and choose path, and we'll choose break apart. And now you can see that this is separate from this. It's really not that important, but that's how it's set up, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the main headpiece here. Okay, so I'm going to call it main head. We'll go ahead and give it a name. And then we're going to do the upper ear. And then we're going to do the, let's go ahead and do the right paw. So we'll do that next. And then we have our left paw. And then we have our center bow, which that's fine. I think what we're going to do though is we're going to do our left bow, center bow, right bow. I think we're going to stitch it in that order. Okay, so now we have our stitch order in place. So now let's go ahead and set our fill stitches here. So we're going to start with our main headpiece here. So you can see that. And I'm going to do the upper ear the same way. So we're going to do extensions, InkStitch params. So the only thing that I'm really going to do here is change my angle of stitches to, let's do negative 20 degrees this time. So instead of going at this angle, it's going to go at this angle. So you see the difference there? So we'll choose apply and quit. And then this guy here, we're going to change that to fill stitches. So InkStitch params. So you can see how that keyboard shortcut to get into params would be a lot better if we had that. So for our angle of stitches, I'm going to do it different than what this angle, the other angle, which was negative 20. So let's do negative 35. Okay, and you'll see that that will be a little bit steeper angle there. So we'll choose apply and quit. And then this one here, we'll do the same thing, InkStitch params. Okay, and then we were going to do 30 degrees, or let's do 35. And we'll choose apply and quit. So this is going to go this direction, this is going to go this direction, but at a steeper angle, and then this is going to go this direction. Okay, so that all is good. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. We'll go to extensions, InkStitch params. And let's go ahead and set this, maybe our main, we'll go ahead and do this angle of stitches at negative 35. So it's going to stitch our stitches going this direction. See there? So we'll choose apply and quit. And then for our center bow, we'll go to extensions, InkStitch params. And we'll set that stitch angle to 45. So we'll go ahead and come in here and we'll do 45. And so it's going to come at us from this direction. So you see there, direction of stitches. So we'll go ahead and accept that, choose apply and quit. And then lastly, we have this one. So we're going to go to extensions, InkStitch params. And this one we'll do, I don't know, let's just do it 30 degrees. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do 30 degrees. And we'll choose apply and quit. All right, so far so good. Now, the stitch angle, I will say this about doing fill stitches. The stitch angle can impact the push-pull compensation. So a lot of times we have to think about what angle we're stitching at for that to counteract the push-pull compensation. For this particular design, I don't think we're going to have too much issues with, but that just is something just to kind of store away in the back of your brain. If you have issues with push-pull compensation, it could sometimes be fixed by modifying our stitch angles. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we did. We do have an issue that we have to resolve, but let's look at what we did so far. So we're going to come in here to Simulator. And this is the thing that we have to think about. That's why we're kind of doing this in just little stages. Because it's a fairly simple design, but you can see it's actually somewhat complex when we really sit and think about it. So what the issue is that we have here are thread jumps. Okay, so you can see here we got a big thread jump here. Let's back this up here so we can see this. So we finished, we come along, and then we're jumping from way up here. We're jumping to our upper ear, and then we're jumping clear down to our paw, and then we're jumping where we finish our paw over here. We're jumping to our other paw. Okay, and then we have a color change here, and we have kind of a similar issue. So this, you see that jump stitch is going over the embroidery that we just made, and then it's starting right there and doing a running stitch all the way up here to do the center bow piece. And then it's finishing up over here, and then it's jumping back over here. You can see it coming all the way across to our next piece. So when we go to info, you can see that we have, what is that, 6 jump stitches? That's a big no-no, okay? So we definitely don't want 6 jump stitches. So we want 0 jump stitches. Yes, that's much better, 0 jump stitches. So, so we have a little bit of work to do to fix that. So let's go ahead and close that. Now, we do want to kind of just be mindful of what order things are stitching. So let's back up here. Let's kind of cover this a little bit. So our main head is stitching, but it's ending way over here. And then it's jumping to the ear at that corner. So what we want to do is we want it to jump from right here to there. Okay? That's what we want it to do. And it can connect at that point right there. That's perfectly fine. But then when the ear finishes, so the ear finishes, we don't want it to finish over here. We want the ear to finish right there at this corner. And then we want a running stitch come all the way down, 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 down here. And then when it starts to stitch this paw, we want the paw to start right there at that intersection. So you can see here, the paw starts up here in the middle, and we don't want that. We want it to start right there. And then we want it to finish, not up top, we want it to finish at this corner, and then we'll have a running stitch over here, and then this paw will start right at that corner, not up here. Okay, so you're like, man, that's a lot of stuff to have to change out, but it's just something we got to do to make the design correctly. And a lot of your designs that are digitized are not done correctly. They got jump stitches going every which way because they haven't taken the time to think it through a little bit and put it like it's supposed to. Okay? So I think what it will do, let's go ahead and create a layer, and let's call it bow, and choose add. I just think this will help us out a little bit. So we'll move these elements to the bow layer, because then we can turn off the bow layer, and we don't have to deal with those right now. Okay, so first things first, we want to add commands. So if we come up here to extensions, and we'll choose InkStitch commands, add commands to the selected object. Really, all we need, we don't really necessarily need to define a start point for this object. We do want to define the end point, however. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. And so now our endpoint has been set, and we're going to set it right there. Because remember, that's where we wanted that to be. Okay. So then what we could do for our ear, we'll go ahead and set the start and end position on the ear. So we'll go to extensions, InkStitch commands. We'll attach commands to the selected object. This time we do want the start and end point. So here we go. So our end is going to end right there at the corner like we need it and want it. And then the start point is going to be right here at that corner. So that jump is going to go from here to here. Now, we are going to come back over the top of this jump with our fill stitch of our bow. So that's no concern. That will be covered up and not be any issue whatsoever. So that's all taken care of. But now what we need to do is we need to run from the end of our earpiece here. We need to run a little manual running stitch down to our paw. But before we do that, let's go ahead and attach those commands to the paw. So InkStitch commands, attach commands. And yes, we want the fill and end position. So now we want it to start right there at the corner, and we want it to end right here. Now we could zoom in here if we don't think we're getting the exact placement that we want, right there at the corner. And let's just take a look at this one. Yes, right there in the middle. So that's fine. And then we want to do the same thing here. So we'll choose extensions, InkStitch, commands, and we will attach commands. Same thing, start and end point here. Okay, and so, well, actually, we really don't need the end position. So we don't really need that command. That's not really that relevant, but we do need the start command. So if you don't need that extra command, I say don't have it. If you don't really absolutely have to have it, then that's just my suggestion there. Okay, so we have the start and end positions of all of the various objects specified. The only thing that we really need to do at this point is we need to come from here to this. So we need a manual running stitch from this piece, and then we're going to need a manual running stitch from this paw to this paw. So to do that, I'm going to switch over to the view display mode and outline, because I think this will be a little bit easier for us to visualize this. So we'll go ahead and grab our pen tool. Remember, B is your keyboard shortcut, and we're going to go right from this corner to this corner, and then we're going to jump, just kind of create a straight line all the way to that point right there, and then that's it. That's all that we're going to do for this one. Okay, so we're going to come back over to stroke. Now you can see it is dashed lines, so that's good, because that's what we need it to be in order for InkStitch to see that that is a running stitch. And then what we need to do here is we're going to take this and we're going to drag this out so it more or less matches the outside edge of our face. Now it doesn't need to be super precise, because remember, we do have a satin stitch that's going around this, and that will cover that up. Okay, so that's not that big a deal. Now what is a big deal though is that this stitches where we need it to stitch. So we have our ear piece. Okay, that's down here, and then we need our manual running stitch to stitch next. So we will go ahead and move that down here. So that is our running stitch, and then our right paw is going to stitch. So that's correct. And then we need a manual running stitch from there to there. Okay, so pretty easy to do. So grab our pen tool here, and we're going to go from this point here to this point here. And we are going to grab our note tool and just bend that to match up. So maybe we'll move this a little bit here. It's a little bit hard to see what that is. This is the line to our icon. This line here is to our face. So you see that a little bit better there. Okay. So that's going to be manual running stitch over to here, but we need to just make sure that we have it before our left paw. So this is going to stitch, then this, then this. All right. So now that we have all that, let's go ahead and look and take a look at what we created here and just make sure that everything is on the up and up here. So we will come down here to Simulator, and then we will watch this stitch out and make sure that this is all done correctly. Now I will say this also, certain embroidery software does this pathing process a lot easier than InkStitch does, but it's also costs money. So that's something to consider. Now, one thing I did not consider is you see here we have some color changes. Those manual running stitches that we added, we had a color change. So we need to change those. So I didn't think about that, but no biggie. So we will select this is our, those two pieces are our running stitches. So we'll come over here. Let's go under the view menu, display mode normal, so we can see what we're doing here. So those two pieces, they're dashed lines, but they're red. Okay, and so we can't have that. So we'll choose stroke paint. And down here is a little icon so that we can pick a color from our document. So we'll pick this same color as our head here. And now everything's the same color. So now we will get the expected results. So we'll go to InkStitch, Visualize Simulator. So you can see where it starts up there at the top of the head, comes in and starts stitching, and then it jumps. Let's turn on our thread jumps here so we can see them. We've got that one jump there, so it's going to jump right at that point where we told it to. And then it's going to start at that point, and then you can see our manual running stitch along there to our paw. And our paw ends right where we told it to. And then we have a manual running stitch we can't see over to our left paw. So now all of this is working the way we expect it to. Okay? So now let's go back to layers here. Let's go ahead and turn off our kitty layer, and then we'll turn on our bow layer. And we essentially have to do the same type of thing. Okay, so for here, we are going to, because this is going to stitch first, we go to InkStitch, commands, and we're going to choose attach commands. And what we want to do for this first object is we want to define the ending position. So it by default put it up here, but no, we want it right down here at this corner, like so. Okay, and then our next piece that's going to stitch is the center of our bow. So we'll come up here to extensions, InkStitch commands, and we're going to attach commands. And for here we need start and end position. So we're going to start it right where we ended it on the previous, and then we can end it up here at this corner, and then this piece here we're going to go to extensions, InkStitch commands, attach commands, and really all we need is the starting position. We don't need the ending position. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. And of course we want our starting position to be right where we ended it. So there you go. And now we'll go ahead and take a look at the embroidery sequence for this. So InkStitch, Visualize and Export, and Simulator. So you see there, let's just stop it here. Let's back up and just look at this. So it finishes, and then it goes straight into the next object. Then it finishes up top, and then straight into the next object. And of course, if we click on our info tab, you can see that in fact, we have no thread jumps, okay? So there we go. So now what we're gonna do is let's go ahead and, we've got our bow layer on, let's turn Kitty on, let's turn Swoosh on, let's turn Nike on, and let's take a look at what we've accomplished up to this point. So we're gonna go ahead and select all of our design, and we're gonna come up here to extensions, and we're gonna come to InkStitch, visualize and export, and we'll choose simulator and take a look at this. Again, when we go into simulator, we're looking at this whole design. Sometimes it does take a few seconds to see what we're doing here. All right, so there we go. Now, the main thing that we want to see here is come into the info tab and how many thread jumps we have. So we have 3 thread jumps happening, and we have no thread trims happening. Let's look at where our thread jumps are. So you can see here, and basically what it's saying here is that this is happening at the color change. Now, I'm not sure what this one is, so I do want to look at that. Oh yeah, that is the one that is too long, so that does register as a thread jump from there to there, yes. And notice what it's calling a thread jump is really a color change. Okay, so obviously we're not going to get away from that. Okay, so very, very highly optimized design. It's going to stitch out great. This is exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and hit File, Save As, and let's save this as Final Less Satin. Okay, so we'll do it like that. Final Less Satin, and we'll save. All right, now, because we've gone so long in this video up to this point, I'm going to stop this video and do the satin around the kitty in a separate video, because that in and of itself is a bit of a process. And so I want you to follow along with what we've already accomplished. Again, you can email us for this source file so you can follow along up to exactly where we're at here before moving on to the satin around the kitty. So I do think, like, if you just follow along, watch the video a couple of times through, and then attempt it yourself, I think you'll have pretty good success of getting to the same point that I have gotten to here. Okay? So I appreciate you watching, and I hope you learned something. And in the comments, if you come across an InkStitch video that does the logo digitizing start to finish, I want to try and compile a list of those videos, because I think that will really help us in our learning process if we have video after video after video, and certainly by different people learning different ways. I just haven't seen a whole lot of videos on doing an entire logo. So again, thanks for watching.